The fire cracked loud enough to make Emily flinch, and in that same second, she felt someone looking at her like the moment before a storm breaks. When the air changes and you don't know why, only that it has. She lifted her eyes across the circle of flames. That was when she saw him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waving or trying to get attention. He just looked at her once, steady and calm, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. The firelight flickered between them, throwing shadows on his face, and then, just like that, he looked back into the flames. Emily's breath caught, even though she told herself it meant nothing. She had not come here for this. She had come to the mountain retreat to escape her life, not complicate it. At 36, Emily Harper felt worn down in ways she couldn't fully explain to people who still believed exhaustion only came from working too hard. Her long-term relationship had ended months ago, quietly and painfully, without a fight big enough to blame. Her job in Portland paid well, but felt empty. Every day felt the same, and that sameness scared her more than change ever had. So when her coworker suggested a weekend retreat, no phones, shared cabins, group meals, a bonfire under the stars, Emily agreed without thinking. She told herself it was just a break, a reset, nothing more. Now, she stood at the edge of the bonfire circle, holding a cup of hot cider she hadn't tasted, her heart beating faster for reasons she didn't understand. She glanced back across the fire. The man was still there. He sat slightly apart from the group, his posture relaxed, hands folded loosely. Eyes focused on the flames, like they were telling him a story no one else could hear. He looked to be in his early 40s, dark hair touched by gray and a quiet presence that made the louder people around him seem distant. Emily turned away, annoyed with herself. This was ridiculous. A look meant nothing. People looked at each other all the time. But as the night moved on, she couldn't shake the feeling. When the group leader called everyone closer to share stories, Emily noticed the man listening closely, nodding when others spoke, never interrupting. When laughter rose, he smiled softly but never pushed himself into the center. And every time Emily forgot about him for a moment, she would feel that same pull look up and catch him glancing away, as if he'd sensed her attention before she even realized it. Her chest felt tight, not with fear, but with something closer to recognition. Later, when the group began drifting back to their cabins, Emily stayed behind. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the air felt colder without the noise. She liked it this way, quiet, honest. She didn't hear footsteps until a voice spoke beside her. "I think fires make people braver," the man said. Emily turned, startled but not alarmed. He stood a few feet away, hands in his jacket pockets, giving her space. "Or more honest," she replied. He smiled at that, just a little. That too. They stood there, the silence between them easy, not awkward. Emily realized she didn't feel the need to fill it. "I'm Emily," she said finally, surprised by her own voice breaking the quiet. "Daniel," he replied. "Nice to finally meet you." "Finally?" she asked. He glanced at the fire. "I noticed you earlier." Her heart skipped, though she kept her expression calm. "I noticed you too." Daniel nodded as if that confirmed something he already knew. They talked then, but only in pieces. Not resumes or life stories. Just thoughts about how rare, real quiet felt these days. About how strange it was to be surrounded by people and still feel alone. Emily found herself speaking more honestly than she usually did, choosing words carefully but not hiding behind jokes or polite answers. Daniel listened without trying to fix anything, and that alone felt like a gift. After a while, the cold crept in. "I should head back," Emily said, though she didn't want to. "Me too," Daniel replied. They walked toward the cabins together, steps slow, unhurried. When they reached the fork in the path, they stopped. "Good night, Emily," he said. "Good night, Daniel." He didn't ask for her number. He didn't suggest coffee or another walk. He just met her eyes once more, the same steady look from across the fire, and then turned and disappeared into the dark. Emily stood there longer than she meant to. That night, sleep came in short waves. Her dreams were filled with firelight and unfinished conversations. with the sense that something important had brushed past her and left a mark. In the morning, she woke early and walked to breakfast, scanning the room without meaning to. Daniel's seat was empty. She told herself not to care, but disappointment settled deep in her chest. Maybe he'd left early. Maybe he'd decided the retreat wasn't for him. Either way, the unfinished feeling grew heavier. She packed her bag later that morning, folding clothes carefully, trying to stay grounded. As she lifted her suitcase, something slid onto the floor. A folded piece of paper. Her name was written on the front in neat, careful handwriting. Emily's heart began to race. Inside there were only 3 words: "Walk with me." Below them was an address she didn't recognize. She sat on the edge of the bed, paper trembling slightly in her hand, her mind spinning with questions. Who leaves a note like this? Who trusts a stranger this much? And why did she already know she wouldn't throw it away? Outside, the retreat buzzed with people saying goodbye, exchanging numbers, promising to stay in touch. Emily felt separate from it all, as if she were standing on the edge of a decision that didn't belong to anyone else. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. The fire from the night before still burned in her mind, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told her that this was only the beginning. The note in her pocket burned hotter than the morning sun. Emily sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the address Daniel had written. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was reckless, that she didn't even know this man. Yet another part, a quieter, braver part she rarely listened to, urged her forward. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, and that feeling was impossible to ignore. The drive was long, winding through Oregon's coastal roads, the ocean appearing and disappearing between tall pine trees. Emily's heart raced with every turn, not from fear, but anticipation. She imagined what she might find at the end of this path. Would Daniel even be there? Would it be awkward? Would it feel as intense as that single look across the fire? Her hands tightened on the wheel, and she exhaled slowly. She didn't know the answers, and she was learning to be okay with that. When she arrived, the ocean wind hit her like a wave. The smell of salt and wet pine filled her lungs, clearing her thoughts. And there he was, standing near the trailhead, looking out over the crashing waves. His posture was relaxed, casual, yet there was something in the way he stood, like he had been waiting. He turned at the sound of her steps, a faint smile appearing, and Emily felt her chest tighten. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I wasn't sure either," Emily admitted. That was all the introduction they needed. No awkward small talk, no forced explanations. They began walking down the trail, side by side, moving in silence at first. Gravel crunched beneath their feet, the ocean roared beside them, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt present. Not anxious, not distracted, just here, walking beside a man she barely knew but somehow felt connected to. Daniel spoke first, carefully, sharing pieces of his life without overloading her. He spoke about a marriage that ended quietly, not with anger, but with distance. About learning to live with loneliness, even when surrounded by people. Emily listened, nodding, feeling an unfamiliar closeness. She shared her own story, to the years of compromise. The fear of starting over, the quiet heartbreaks that no one else noticed. They didn't interrupt each other. They didn't rush. Words flowed in a way that felt natural, honest, and freeing. The trail curved, leading them closer to the cliffs. Waves crashed against the rocks far below, sending a spray that touched their faces. Emily noticed how Daniel didn't flinch at the height, how his calm presence balanced her nervous energy. At one point, he stopped, turning to face her. "I didn't want to scare you," he said, eyes meeting hers. "That night by the fire, I felt something, and I've learned not to ignore that anymore." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to laugh at herself for being so affected by a single night, yet she couldn't deny it. "So have I," she whispered, almost to herself. They stood on the edge of the cliff, not touching, yet the space between them felt full. Full of possibility, full of understanding. Emily realized that connection didn't always need dramatic gestures or declarations. Sometimes it was in the quiet, in the way someone listened, in the way someone waited for you to speak your truth without judgment. "I'm not asking for promises," Daniel continued, his voice low and sincere. "Just honesty." Emily nodded, feeling the weight and clarity of the moment. "That's all I can give," she said. They resumed walking, slower now, letting the wind whip around them, the sound of waves filling the gaps between words. Emily noticed how every step felt intentional, how the conversation didn't need to be profound to feel meaningful. Sometimes it was the simplicity of presence that spoke the loudest. At a small overlook, Daniel stopped again. He looked at the ocean, then back at her. "Emily, I don't know where this will go," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to ignore it." "Not this time." Emily felt a shiver run through her. "Neither do I," she said. No grand gestures followed. No dramatic kiss or sweeping declaration. They simply walked back toward the trailhead, sharing stories and silence in equal measure. Emily realized how rare it was to find someone who could listen and share without expectation. Someone who could make her feel seen without trying to change her. By the time they reached the end of the trail, the sun had dipped low, painting the ocean with gold and pink. Daniel turned to her. "I guess this is where we part for now," he said, though neither of them sounded unhappy. Emily smiled, a mixture of relief and anticipation. "For now," she agreed. As she drove home, the fire from the retreat no longer felt like a memory. It felt like the spark of something new, something delicate, tentative, but undeniable. She understood now that some connections didn't shout. They whispered. They waited for the right person to be brave enough to listen. And she had listened. Emily knew she had followed, not blindly, but with her eyes wide open this time. Every mile of that coastal drive had been a choice, and it felt empowering. She felt lighter, freer, and, strangely, more herself than she had in years. She thought about the quiet strength in Daniel's eyes, the patience in his words, and the calm certainty in his presence. She realized she wanted more of that, more moments like this, more conversations that didn't need to fill the silence, more connections that were felt rather than forced. For the first time in a long while, Emily didn't feel like she was running from something. She felt like she was stepping into something uncertain yet hopeful, hesitant yet curious. She wasn't expecting a fairy tale, and there were no guarantees about the future. But she knew one thing. She would remember this day, this walk, this ocean. And the man who had given her a reason to follow, not blindly, but with intention. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the sky had turned a deep shade of twilight, the ocean still vivid in her mind. She placed the note from Daniel on the dashboard, her fingers brushing the words that had set everything in motion. "Walk with me?" She smiled softly, realizing that she had indeed walked not just down a trail, but into a moment that might change her life. Emily stepped out of the car, breathing in the evening air. The retreat, the fire, the silence, and the look across the flames all felt like pieces of a puzzle she was only just beginning to understand. And though nothing dramatic had happened, everything felt possible. She had followed with courage, she had embraced uncertainty, and she had listened to the quiet pull of something she could not yet name. Inside, as she prepared for the night, Emily felt a calm she hadn't felt in years. The future was unknown, but for the first time, that didn't scare her. She knew she had taken the first step toward something real, something tender, something that might grow quietly but powerfully. She knew she would not forget this day, this walk. And the man who had shown her that sometimes all it takes is one look and the courage to follow. And as she closed her eyes that night, Emily realized that life wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it was about noticing the sparks in the quiet moments, choosing to walk toward them, and trusting that the path would unfold as it should. The fire had sparked something in her, and the ocean had whispered possibilities she was finally ready to explore. She slept with that thought, letting it guide her dreams, knowing that tomorrow, no matter what happened, she had already started a journey worth taking.